Don't judge. These are my top 10 films based on personal experiences, interests, and whatnot. On a different day, I might change the order of these films' placements, but in this moment, in this list, this is what I'm going for. I'd love for you to post your own top 10 films in the comments. Enjoy. At number 10 is Drive, the 2011 crime thriller romance drama. I saw this film after I completed the toughest exams of my life during my summer vacations and absolutely fell in love with it. It had one of the most iconic soundtracks I'd ever heard, featuring songs like Night Call, Under Your Spell, A Real Hero, introducing me to the retrowave genre, which has now become mainstream. Not to miss the tense background score by Cliff Martinez and Chromatics. Not only is the music outstanding, but the film itself is a visual treat. It has beautifully shot scenes with well-acted roles, and it very slowly builds up the storyline that pays off rather well at the end. The performances of Carey Mulligan, Bryan Cranston, and especially Ryan Gosling were fantastic. Everything about this film is perfect if you watch it with the right intentions, because if you're going into it thinking, I want to watch just a mind-numbing action film, you will be disappointed. This is a modern classic. No wonder why it won the Cannes Award for Best Director. At number 9 is Anand, the 1971 classic comedy drama film by Hrishikesh Mukherjee. From the other classics of Mukherjee, this film stands out the most for a number of reasons. First, because of its solid cast, with the first time ever that Rajesh Khanna and Amitabh Bachchan were on screen together, to the greatly written and acted story of the film. Anand is a movie about dealing with the tough situations and suffering life brings to all of us in some shape or form. And while the film is about a terminally ill man whose fate is already written, it takes away from the specific sickness or situation to a more abstract look at the meaning of life and why happiness must be our ultimate goal. It is still one of the most amazing movies ever made in Indian cinema, and it must be watched by everyone from everywhere, and its meaning should be carried with us every second. A similar film, but with a completely opposite outlook on life, comes from the Russian filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky. At number 8, the film Nostalgia, released in 1983, which deals with the issues of existentialism, patriotism, and with the age-old relations of death and life. It is a serious film with no humor, unlike Anand, which is full of comedy. Yet I like this film for its originality, for depicting harsh truths of our society and the world right in our faces. One example of this is where a man gives a long speech before setting himself on fire, as the world stops and looks at him, but without ever trying to help him, as if his pain is somewhat a source of guilty entertainment for them, just so that something exciting happens in their otherwise silent, dead lives. While in the distance, the only one crying for the man is his dog. Such beautifully written scenes are just as beautifully shot in this film, and that's why they really speak to you, because it's just amazing. Whether you may be a Russian exile like Tarkovsky was, or just a lower middle class kid from a small Indian town. Martin Scorsese's debut film Taxi Driver stands at number 7 in my top 10 films. It is an all-time classic which is quite hard to describe because it has so much yet so little going on throughout the entire film. It starred the legendary actor and longtime collaborator of Scorsese, Robert De Niro, and man does he not carry the film on his shoulders. Taxi Driver takes time transitioning from being this lonely, depressed night shift driver's boring life to a crime thriller about a rogue man rescuing a young prostitute. If you haven't seen this film but you like Joker, then you should know that Joker heavily takes a lot of its story and themes from Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, both of which were written and directed by Scorsese, starring Robert De Niro. At number 6 is The Shining by Stanley Kubrick. This is my favorite horror film of all time, which is why it is the only horror film of this entire list. There is something about this film that keeps me and so many others coming back to it even after 4 decades of its release. People are still discovering things about it every day, from fan theories about Native Americans to unhealthy relations between parents and their children to the American Gold Reserve System. Yes, you heard that right. But even on the surface, just as a horror film, Kubrick packs in so much here in this 2.5-hour isolation journey that the end result is one of the most remarkable achievements in cinematic history. At number 5 is, and obviously this list wouldn't be anything without these films, are The Godfather Part 1 and Part 2. I know this must have angered a lot of you, but like I said, if you asked me on a different day, I'd probably change the order of these films. But all these are my top 10. I put both of these films in one place because to me the first 2 Godfather films feel more like a seamless duology than the third installment, which is sort of like a bad epilogue. I don't think I can say anything about the Godfather series that hasn't already been said. It has a great cast, great performance, and an even greater screenplay. There has never been a better depiction of mafia in films than Godfather Part 1 and Part 2. At number 4 is 2001 A Space Odyssey. While watching this film for the first time now may be a little underwhelming and even boring at some points for many people, but others will find it magnificent. I must say that if you're going to watch this film, watch it from the eyes of a person who knows color and cinema for just about 2 decades. From the perspective of a person in 1968, a year before man even set foot on the moon. That is how old this film is, yet its visuals are strikingly beautiful and extremely memorable. So memorable that today's modern sci-fi films, even with all their technology, fail to even come close. This film was an experiment for Kubrick, a very large budget experiment indeed, but man, the end result is the greatest space film I've ever seen and heard. Because besides the hauntingly beautiful visuals of the film, the soundtrack, when you hear it, is simply enchanting. Most of which you'll realize you've heard somewhere before, and I can't bet that. At number 3 is my all-time favorite psychological crime thriller film, Fight Club. The first rule about Fight Club is that you don't talk about Fight Club, so I won't. But it's one of the best films I've ever seen, and you should really watch it, trust me. At number 2 is the low-budget science fiction film, The Man from Earth. This just may be one of the best pieces of screenplay writing I've seen in decades. The entire film, mind you, takes place in one room, and it's just a bunch of people talking. But what they're talking about and how things unfold is seriously going to startle you, amaze you, confuse you, and by the end, it'll just leave you with this odd, satisfying feeling about what you just saw. This is a film that needs to be watched multiple times because it's so layered and it's such a beautiful film. I don't even know. I remember I found this film on my brother's laptop when I was a kid, and I played it for a few minutes, but I didn't get most of what they were talking about. And it wasn't until 7 years later that I came across this film again, and decided to finally watch it. And when I did, I was seriously blown away. Alright, I know this list is very different to other lists that people have. That's because I didn't want to do the same thing again and again. I wanted to put in different kinds of films, see what I like the most from what genres, and how I can order them. The thing is, I wanted to put a lot of films in this list, but obviously 10 is a number and you can only choose 10. So here's a few honorable mentions before I talk about my favorite film of all time. Now, on to my favorite film of all time. Blade Runner is my favorite film of all time. Oddly enough, I've watched other films in this list more times than I've seen Blade Runner. I've seen more in-depth analysis, critiques, and whatnot of other films more than I have of Blade Runner as well. The dystopian world of Blade Runner is also something I wouldn't want to live in, though it looks pretty from a distance. Many people say that this film is even boring, and to some degree I understand that. So why is it then my favorite film of all time? Well, I saw Blade Runner during a very rough time in my life. It was a strange time for me. I had no friends, I wasn't doing great in academics, wasn't very well in sports, I'd gotten unhealthy, I was depressed basically. Then I came across this film and it took me to another world. 2019, the year the film takes place in, wasn't too far from the year I was in when I watched this film. But something about Blade Runner stuck by me so much. Whether it was the beautiful visual beauty of the film, or breathtaking soundtrack by Vangelis, or the dreamlike feeling that the film always gives me. I don't know. I'd never experienced more joy in anything than watching the slowly paced story of this film with a reluctant hero that doesn't really want to do anything, just like I was at the time. And then when finally he discovers a new meaning in life, he decides to go ahead with it, even if it means risking everything else for it. The kind of films we watch says a lot about our personality, and if you can reverse engineer my taste in these films, then I think you can tell why I like most of these films. Blade Runner is a classic journey told in a modern style with philosophical connections to age-old mythologies. It is a truly classic science fiction detective film, and to many it might even be a revolutionary film, and to many others it might be a boring same old kind of film. But to me, this is a film that brought me out of a very tough time of my life without ever saying something to me directly. Hey guys, thank you for watching MDR. Please do not dislike if you don't like the list, because it's my subjective view on it. List your top 10 films in the comments if you'd like, and make sure you leave a like so I can get a bigger audience. Don't forget to subscribe, it'll only take a second. And hey, have some popcorn. Enjoy your life, man. Don't get too offended.